How has unbelief tried to dismiss or refute the resurrection? Hi, my name is Ted Rosenblatt, and I'm here with my father, Dr. Rod Rosenblatt, and this is Talks with Dad Rod. What we're kind of doing here is another rhetorical toy of putting our critics in the room with us and try to put the best spin on it. It's easy for us to use internet level, and we'll cover this in a couple of ways, but using internet level assertions. But let's first focus on the idea that in unbelief is a position. It's a stance. It's not a person. So it's sort of, that's another rhetorical device. But if I'm going to in my unbelief, is that, how am I doing that? How am I refuting or trying to undermine the resurrection?
Well, in the history of Christian thought, there have been several. They knew that it was a linchpin to the truth of the gospel. And so you had several attempts, some of them not so great, but several attempts to account for the resurrection without there being a resurrection at all. For example, one of the early ones was that Jesus never really died on the cross. He was deeply wounded, and in the cool of the tomb, he sort of revived and then showed himself as if he were risen from the dead. The problem with that one is the Roman crucifiers knew their job pretty well. They did it a lot.
Well, let me ask this.
That was just one view.
Sure. When that sort of thing occurs, is that because people have looked at the historical record and said, I believe that the evidence in the historical record points toward this occurrence? Or are they coming up with a story and then trying to dig through the historical record and find evidence for what they...
Well, many times they're just looking for a rationale for their unbelief. Doesn't mean a lot of thinking. Just some way to intelligently say no. But intelligently saying no isn't really a position. That's why all of these, it's worth every Christian looking at a basic apologetics book and seeing what those positions were, who did it, who said it, whether it got very far or didn't, and how the faith survived that criticism that he was never really raised from the dead. That's worth knowing. There are only a finite number of these that have appeared, and those are worth knowing.
So you were trained by Dr. John Montgomery, and one of the things you've done in your classroom forever is sort of teach that, is give kids some sense of how you can know this to be true.
Yeah.
From his position as a lawyer, being able to make the case within a courtroom.
Right.
But his case that he makes is based on evidence.
Right.
He goes through the hard evidential argument about what was said and how we can have any trust that
confidence
these things, confidence that it's
sure.
true. And
by the way, I got none of that at seminary.
Which?
Zero.
Of that training?
Zero. I had to go outside seminary to get it.
To a specialist, kind of like going to a specialist of a doctor.
Yeah, but it raises the question, why in seminary would you not have that as part of your curriculum?
Well, now, here in 2023, we're really finding out what matters. How do you know? We've slid down the slope so far into subjectivity. Everybody's feelings determine all the reality of everything all the time, and it's
tragic.
It is utterly unstable.
Yep.
The question finally becomes, how can you trust anything? How can you know anything is true? How can, if somebody comes and tells me they had lunch yesterday at a certain place,
right?
How can you even trust that? You're taking them at their word. Any particular event in human history.
We're drowning in subjectivity, drowning in it.
So the question with the skeptics seems to be often one of them is, you're going to need to give me better evidence than that.
Yeah.
So they make an internal, am I wrong? You tell me. It sounds like they're making an internal judgment that is often not informed. They haven't studied the subject. They haven't gone through it and tried to determine how you can know historical documents, and most people you wouldn't expect have done that. Everybody's on the internet now, right? Everybody does things in tweet lengths.
Yeah. Yeah.
We work with assertions in our culture.
Yeah. And the the cash value of assertions is very low. It's easy to assert. Think Islam. Islam just historically asserted. And then I think, as a seminary student, are we just asserting? Or are we doing something in addition to assertion? And historically, Christianity did more than just assert. They provided evidence in behalf of Christ telling the truth about himself and who he claimed to be, not just asserting.
And as I heard spoken to one critic in one of these arguments in your house, was he was using the "I'm going to need better evidence to believe what you're saying" argument, until someone spoke up and said, "No, that's not how this works, actually." You once they've provided their evidence, it is now on you to provide
counter
your evidence for your position that is superior to theirs.
Right.
That's the courtroom position.
Yep.
This is not, it's just assumed negative, and I could just keep raising the bar.
Sure.
Every time I'm deciding internally that your evidence that you've produced for me isn't sufficient for me.
Right. Well, good for that. John became a lawyer later on.
I didn't mention names.
Yeah.
But this is the struggle is that we all become our own judge, jury, and executioner on the subject.
Right.
We render all judgments, and we hear something that's said, and we just say, "Dah."
Yeah. That is not an argument.
You still haven't convinced me that your sky god exists. Your sky dude.
Yeah.
Whatever, your spaghetti monster, whatever the critics like to yak. And we say, but you haven't even considered the evidence yet.
Right.
Have you looked into this? But of course, in the internet age, no one looks into anything. It's if it's not popping up on the first page of Google and easily readable by me in the next 30 seconds, then that's just too often the case.
Yes.
Or even worse now, if it's not shown to me in a 1 minute TikTok short, then I'm just not going to buy anything. We've just down this hill. It's
yes.
anti-thinking.
Yes.
People aren't taught to consider. And
yeah, Christianity really does offer an opportunity of rebuttal because it took place in a factual world and argues from fact. That's not universally true in the religious world.
I said something once in a comment with an unbeliever who giving the usual internet snark, I think it was on YouTube, where I was saying, why is it that we teach ancient Greek history as though those written texts have enough veracity
that we can trust
that we can trust that they're accurate.
Right.
Then we look at the Gospels and we can show that using the same measurements of veracity, they have even more veracity than what's taught in university over the Greek histories, but we dismiss them.
Yep.
Why is that?
Yeah. It's a really good question.
And I think, you tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's emotional a lot of the time. It's not an informed argument.
It's not an evidential argument that's packed. It's just a matter of comparison, and you say, gee, this stuff really does bear up under pressure, and I didn't really consider that it would. It's sort of surprising to me. I thought it would evaporate under pressure. It isn't evaporating.
And the key part for us is that Scripture says that the entirety of the claims of Scripture hinge on the one event. It's the one event that the detractors know they got to use to conquer.
That's right. That's right.
They've got to disprove it. They got to show that it was a lie. They got to say this was a bunch of people
fakery,
making it up.
Yep.
But they've yet to do it. They have yet to successfully pull that off.
Yep.
And evidence keeps coming I love our archaeologists. They find stuff.
Yeah.
No. And then they dig something up and oops.
You brought one up the other day that there was no Pontius Pilate. And in our century, somebody dug up the Pilate stone, and that changed that one.
There he was.
But
the critics stopped saying that then. They had to shift to a different gear.
Right.
He was just a fictional character, evaporated because there he was.
Yep. And the history of archaeology over and over and over and over again confirms the biblical record. It's a good record of confirmation.
And in alignment with St. Paul, there are no bones of Jesus to be dug up. Not yet. They found James, apparently. But there was no Jesus next to him, oddly, because families are buried together. You would expect the bones of Jesus to be in the same zone. And there was no Jesus. There was only James. And that's exactly what Paul said would be the one thing that could tear the whole thing to the ground.
Exactly.
You find the bones of Jesus and this whole thing falls apart.
Yeah. How many religions are factually overthrowable? One. And in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul specifies it. If Christ be not raised, we are of all people most to be pitied.
Talk about wasting our time.
Uh-huh.
And being moral for a completely not correct reason.
Right.
We can just do whatever. Now we're just back to Lord of the Flies, make it up as we go.
Yeah. Yeah. And you use that sort of substantiation, just that the resurrection of Jesus, and look for parallels, factual parallels in the world of religion and see what you find. And there isn't going to be much.
So this is a lot of fun. This is right. For us, this is right and low, slow over the plate. So I hope you enjoy this, and it makes you think. So we want you to enjoy it. We do this lowbrow here on for a reason, that you can sit with us and have fun and feel comfortable. You can relax on the way to work or something, or even at work. Maybe you can listen to an episode of ours. But we want you to be able to think through this too. This is for people who can work through this. And when we say evidence, we can bring the evidence. This is what Dad has done at university for years. So I hope this is helpful to you and makes you think. And we will go to 1517.org for more, and we will see you on social media. Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us on Talks with Dad Rod, part of the 1517 Podcast Network. This podcast and all 1517's content is made possible through financial support by listeners just like you. Please visit 1517.org for more, and please consider clicking on the donate button and making a recurring or one-time contribution to help us share this good news in a world which so desperately needs it.